journey been as you envisioned it would be to date?
No, definitely not. I think if all of us who are in this room know how tough it is to start a business. I think probably 10 times more difficult than what you envision when you start, but I think 10 times more meaningful as well.
And from the time you started, we try to go all the way back. What is that one conversation that you would consider to be a very important conversation that has led to the founding of the company and where the company is at the moment?
Sure. I don't think there was a single conversation. I think we've had faith on our side quite a lot. So myself, Matthew, Bentley, and Sizwe, we didn't know each other at all before starting Pineapple. So each of us applied individually to an innovation competition, and we got put in the same team by chance. So I think the four of us sort of finding each other by chance is, I think, we probably don't have one single mutual friend between us. So we wouldn't have ever met in real life, and we got put together in the same team and really got along super well, similar values, similar objectives, and I suppose the rest is history.
And this is a very rare thing, right? Because ideally when you start a company, of course, you want to start the company with people that you have a certain level of trust. So the journey of you guys just connecting together and deciding that this is what you are going to do, and the level of trust, I suppose. I think starting a company with someone requires a level of trust, particularly just trusting they can be able to do the part of the job that they're expected to do. You guys have built a very, I think, functioning relationship based on where the company is. Can you just walk us through how that journey has been since you guys met?
So after we met, we followed a process called design thinking, which is you start with the customer and you look at what their pain points are, and then you build small prototypes around that, test the prototype, see if it works, if it resonates, then you keep on iterating in that fashion. So we didn't have an end goal in mind. We always said fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And there's been many solutions that we implemented that we think would work that didn't end up working. But I think to the trust point, I think you really get to see who people really are when things are tough, and that's probably one of the blessings of a startup is things are going to be tough. So people's true colors are going to come out in that journey.
What are those tough moments that you guys have ever come across as a company? How close have you ever come to perhaps running out of operating capital, or even just really having tough moments in the company? And the most important thing I think for me for this is, how did you deal with that? So you can clearly identify this is where we are as an organization. You as the leader and the rest of the team, you can see this is where we are, and there's a problem up ahead. What have those critical challenges been? In fact, what would you say has been one of your biggest challenges while running Pineapple Insurance?
So fundraising, obviously very, very tough. I think especially early stage in Africa, South Africa. We've been 1 month away from Friday twice before funding round. We opened one funding round the month that COVID hit, then we opened another funding round the month that the war in Ukraine broke out. So that's some terrible timing. I think our motto has always been focus on the things that you can control. So whenever things have got tough, we've just knuckled down, because the things you can't control, you're not going to end COVID, you're not gonna stop the war in Ukraine. You can control how you service your customers. You can control the quality of the data that you present to investors, the engagements you have with them. So we've always had, I think our whole team's got a very strong internal locus of control. So we always take accountability ourselves for what the outcome is, and we never blame any external factors for the outcome.
I'm gonna come back to the fundraising question at some point, and I think the audience will as well. Through this period, particularly 3 periods that you mentioned, where you were like a month away from closing down, what are those few lessons or the most important lesson that you've ever learned? Because I think we do have a number of people in the audience who might have come across such a situation. If they haven't, every startup eventually gets there. The powder gets dry. What are some of those particular lessons you've learned when you came across this particular situation?
So I think one thing that really helps is if you can, and I know it's very difficult, if you can at least while you're raising funding and you're under that pressure, keep a close eye on how the business is doing. Because you're more likely to close that funding round if you have like a few up months in that period. Because the one thing we've learned about fundraising is there's two forces at play. So the first one is for an investor. The first force is they've got the fear of making a bad decision. So they make the investment in your business and the business ends up failing. And if you're only negotiating with one party and you don't bring a lot of energy yourself, then that's the only force, and they'll always have an incentive to kick the can down the road because then they don't run that risk. But the other force that counters that, which is what you need to generate yourself, is the fear of missing out. So that's the other big fear that investors have, is they've got this deal in front of them. You always hear about the VC guys who missed out on Uber, Airbnb. You always hear those stories. So you have to negotiate with multiple investors at the same time, because if you only negotiate with one, you've only got one of those two forces, and the outcome's always going to be they're going to kick the can down the road. So we've always said that when we open a fundraise, we're either in fundraising or we're not in fundraising. You can't be, if you're consistently in fundraising, it's also hard to create that FOMO because there's no scarcity on time. So we fell into this habit of when we're in fundraising mode, we speak in parallel to as many people as possible, because each investor must get the sense that there's other investors that are going to sweep in before them, and then they'll miss out on the opportunity, and that force helps to get people over the line.
You had some impressive early backers. I mean, you've worked with a number of partners. What I'm curious to find out is what did they see at the very beginning? Here's a very nascent industry. You have just gone through, I think, the Hanover process. And actually, I would love to talk about perhaps when you were selected, what is it that they were seeing? Were they seeing that there could be potential for disruption in this particular industry? Did we have outdated technology perhaps in terms of insurance practices? What are some of those things that you think your early investors, your early supporters really recognized, and do you still carry those fundamentals to date?
So I think the one thing we saw works a lot better is if you've got a very, very big problem to address. So we tried a lot of A/B testing in sort of investor pitches, and sometimes you present very much solution-orientated stuff, and it's very easy to poke holes in solutions. But when we found our sweet spot, it's when we really presented the problem-based stuff, 80% problem, 20% solution. And then if you look back at our early pitch decks, like those solutions, probably about 5% of them are still in the business today. But we've always said we're not going to get attached to the solution, but the problem is real and the problem is there. And then I think the most pivotal meeting we had there was over time we saw there were these repeating questions that came up in a lot of the fundraising meetings. So we said, why don't we make like a concrete piece of evidence with research for each of these questions? So we had this Excel sheet that had probably like 200 different questions that investors can ask, and we sat in the room with the board, and every single question that came up, there was a hyperlink that we clicked out of the Excel sheet, so they could see like the research was thorough and proper, and there wasn't a single question that they could ask that we didn't have a real tangible answer for. So I think especially because we We were about 27 years old at that point, completely unproven entrepreneurs, no product in the market yet, and no customers. But what we've done to prove that there's customer interest is we really invested a lot of time into our social media accounts. We really built up a big following on social media, speaking to the problem in insurance. So at least we did whatever we could to show evidence that we will be able to sell the product once we get it live. So and I think that speaks to that locus of control. So on the one hand, you could say like, oh, we haven't got the capital to launch the product yet and show customers. But on the other hand, you can say, okay, we can actually go out there and prove on social media that we can get people on. We started like a waiting list that people could join as soon as the product was live. So I think on every single question, we try to at least have one point of tangible evidence that we can do it.
Okay, so now, I've been struggling with my questions on this. I don't know what is going on with my Wi-Fi, but I want to now take you to the very beginning of your journey, and then I'm going to get into some specifics about Pineapple Insurance. For those that don't know you, who is Marnus? I know you grew up with your two brothers, and from a little bit of secrets that I've managed to gather, you guys were very competitive, and nature enthusiast you are. Please just introduce yourself in that sense, as well as have any of these characteristics that you had early on sort of like fallen into the business or influence the way that you run Pineapple Insurance today? Are you still that very same competitive? Like when you think about your competitors that we're not going to mention, but when you think about them, you're like, I want to beat these people.
So yeah, I think we were three brothers. I was the middle child. So I think as the middle child, you always have to be the one that makes peace. So I think that's really helped me in the leadership role, because very often you're going to have to get people with different points of view to work together. I think by nature we are very competitive, but we try to compete with ourselves from yesterday rather than to compete with competitors, because otherwise in areas where you are ahead you won't capitalize on it enough, and in areas where you are behind where maybe you shouldn't be focusing, you're just going to focus on that just for the sake of catching up with your competition. So I think we're very competitive, but more so competitive with the targets that we set and where we are relative to that than with concerning ourselves what everyone else is doing.
Interesting. Are there any other childhood influences that you feel like they still remain with you to date?
So yeah, I grew up in a very loving family, had amazing parents as role models, always had a very good example of how people should treat each other at home, and I think that's really helped us. And I think our co-founders are from similar scenarios. So, and that's not the only way to learn that, but I think we've learned that. Well, I've tried to carry that through, is to try to treat the people around me with love, and I think love always feels like such a hallmark word. It's like it feels like love is an emotion, but the way that I view love is as an orientation, because love can make you angry, it can make you sad, it can make you happy, it can invoke a lot of emotions. So for me, love is an orientation, and I try to treat the people we work with love, and to orient myself in that way.
Love is an orientation. This is fascinating. I think this is the very first time I'm hearing this. Love is an orientation. Just drill deep, a little bit deep into this, and particularly you mentioned this is how you look at the organization that you guys are building and how you treat the people that you work with. How does that relate to the overall arc of the organization? So suppose you have some team members that you may feel are not shaping up to the culture or the standards that you're setting, or they're not helping to move the company in the direction that you would want to move into. Now, outside of just using love as an orientation, generally as a human being, how does this play a factor into the company as an overall?
So one thing that we've had a lot of discussions as a leadership team as we've matured is that balance between mercy and justice. And I think if your dad really loves you, if you do something wrong, he isn't expressing an orientation of love towards you if he does nothing. So if you deal with an infant, the only way to deal with that infant is with mercy, because an infant is never wrong. But as people mature, then your orientation towards them must become more the balance of mercy versus justice. And I think we've always tried to incorporate that into the work environment, because if there's no justice and there's just pure mercy, then your top performers are also going to start to feel resentful. Your bottom performers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I think the foundation for that is to call to everyone to take on the maximum responsibility that they can possibly carry. And once people have that correct orientation of we all here by playful invitation to take as much responsibility as what we can possibly carry, then the conversation about justice, if the rules are clearly outlined from the start, then the conversation about justice is a lot easier to be had. I think as a symbol, the way we see it a lot is either stone and water, with stone being your mercy and your rules, and water being your ability to grow and experience and innovate, or a walled garden. So the wall is like the rules, and the garden is the opportunity. And when you have a walled garden, then there's the opportunity for play, which is, that's what you want to create in a work environment, is everyone who is there by playful invitation. No one who's there is there by force. We're not forcing anyone to be here. Anyone who's here is here by playful invitation. But if you play a game, there has to be rules. Like if we're going to play basketball together, I can't bring a horse onto the court, because then the game breaks. So whenever we play a game together, there has to be a set of clear rules, and everyone has to adhere to those rules. So I think if the values in the organization are clearly outlined, it's a lot easier for us to have those tough conversations. And I think what we've seen is, I think what's really interesting for me is probably most people in this room will, what they found is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Ocean's personality measurement. It's the most rigorously scientifically proven personality test that you can take. And the five categories are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And people who start businesses are generally high in trait openness. So I'm like that. Most of my co-founders are like that. It means that you're open to new experience, you're innovative, etc. And then people who are incredibly good at running businesses are generally high in trait conscientiousness. And that means you're industrious, orderly, you've got the ability to work hard. But what can be a problem is if someone's incredibly high in trait conscientiousness, they also want to follow the rules. So they won't have that ability to innovate that easily at the start. So it might suppress innovation quite a bit. So what we realized, I think it took us probably too long to learn this, is that all of us weren't incredibly high in trait conscientiousness. I think we were able to act despite ourselves and work hard to get to where we want to be, but we needed to start bringing people in who are high in trait conscientiousness. So people who are high in trait conscientiousness are industrious, orderly, they're very good, they want to follow the rules. It's more black and white people as opposed to grey areas. And when you start to bring those people into your leadership positions, they start to clearly define where those boundaries and where those rules are. And that creates a very safe environment for people to operate within. So, yeah, I think definitely, if I could go back probably a little bit sooner on the journey, I would have brought on like those high in trait conscientiousness people.
I think this is not a very usual thing. I suppose a number of people to go through founders that go through the process themselves, as opposed to being taught it in some other place. What has that journey been like for you to come to realize these particular characteristics, and some that you can also share as a pathway for founders in the room who want to get to this level of awareness, of self-consciousness, of what those attributes they have and what attributes they need to hire for to be able to make the business and have it function as a whole?
So I think doing that Ocean's personality test is probably a good start. So that'll show you what your preference is, and I think you also know this from the time you're small, like what are the things that really call to you, where work doesn't feel like work. When you do that, it feels like play. And then you know that's your core orientation. It doesn't mean that you can't act in the opposite way, because that's what maturity is. Maturity is being able to sacrifice the present to the future and being able to act despite your personality. So if you're low in conscientiousness, being able to work hard, put your stuff in order. So I think doing that test is probably a good place to start, but I think also consistently asking yourself, like, when is your work feeling like play and when is your work feeling like a real slog? And the areas where your work feels like a real slog, that's probably where you need to bring someone in that likes doing that stuff.
A little bit on your educational background. You hold a qualification, a combination of accounting and law, if I'm correct. Why that particular path, and how much has it been influential to the journey that you ultimately took with Pineapple?
Yeah, it's definitely helped a lot. I think the accounting portion really helps you to understand the key drivers of the business, because that's essentially what accounting is being able to reflect how business is performing. And the legal part, I think, has helped on two fronts. Obviously, from a legal perspective, it's helped, but I think a lot of the legal arguments also help you to navigate complex business environments. So being able to think about the difference between if something's right or wrong based on process, reasonability, and clearly being able to articulate why you feel something really helps in bringing everyone along on the same journey.
Back to the company. At what point with your co-founders do you then start having the belief that this could work? What is it that you're looking at? What were you noticing at the time?
So I think for us, we've always followed the system called OKR, which I think some people might be familiar with. It's Google's sort of KPI system, where you set measurable targets and you set them at a level that is quite hard to achieve. So their theory is you should reach 7 out of 10 of your goals. And if you reach 10 out of 10 of your goals, you didn't set aggressive enough targets. So for us, we've always been very numbers driven. So tracking how many customers are coming in, what's the cost of acquisition, how long are customers staying on board, and then setting very aggressive targets, not incremental targets. I think that's a difference that we have to a corporate. Is a corporate will look at last year's numbers and they'll add 10 or 20% or whatever they think is reasonable. We sort of look forward to where we want to be in 5 years and work backwards from there, then set those targets. And if things track along that path, then you know you're on the right track.
At the moment, how are you currently tracking that? What are some of your, perhaps, let's say, target for the next 5 to 10 years as a company?
So the way we do it is we have 3 big OKRs at a company level, and then every single team has OKRs that cascade all the way down, and all of them fold up into one of those 3 OKRs. And every single day on every single team, we log how that previous day performed versus what the target is. So everyone in the organization needs to know exactly how their function contributes to what the 3 key company objectives are. So in our case, it's policy sold, loss ratio, and book size, which is sort of a combination of your retentions and your sales. And then we actually have a 4th one, which we don't track that regularly, but it's as important is customer perception. So what's our online ratings and our net promoter scores?
How has this been actually? So suppose you are going through this particular process and for a consecutive number of days or weeks, the sentiment is not so good and you recognize areas that need to be worked on. How does that process look like? So you identify the clear problems that you have, perhaps within a particular department. What is the process that you then start taking to rectify or start fixing those?
So for us, it always starts with an honest conversation. So we'll pull all of leadership into a room, show the numbers, say, guys, we've got a really big problem here, and if we continue down this path, we're gonna have it even in the early stages, what we won't have a business in 6 months. So you have an honest conversation with everyone, and then you say, go back to your spaces because everyone's got clear swimming lanes, and go and turn over every single rock to try and figure out what's happening there. And we do that top down, bottom up. No matter what you need to do, you need to figure out why. And what's probably the most effective, what we've seen is taking a bottom up approach rather than a top down approach, because what is weird to explain in a startup is sometimes your analytics will say something, but you will keep hearing anecdotes that conflict with that statistic. And this is something I think Jeff Bezos from Amazon, they follow this rule, is if the anecdote and the statistics contradict each other, then the anecdote's probably right. So then the only way to get to the bottom of those anecdotes is like Matt's friend had a poor experience when trying to buy car insurance. Let's go and look at that journey, listen to the call. Like our net promoter score might be 80%, but if we're hearing individual stories of things going wrong, then let's put more weight on those stories to see if they hold any weight. So that's really helped us quite a lot.
I want to expand a little bit on this, on the Jeff Bezos analogy. So the internal data and perhaps the fundamental information that you have says to you things on an upward trend. And every single data point that you can absolutely look at that is helping you collect this information says to you things should be going well, the revenue should be going up, customer sentiment should be positive. But actually when you then start engaging with the people on the ground or the customers themselves, they're giving you feedback that's opposite to whatever the data is saying. How do you reconcile the two? And more than just reconciling these two, how important is the process of reconciliation between whatever information? Usually as founders, we take some time in the boardrooms and in the offices, or even small business owners. We don't spend enough time engaging with the people that we're selling our solutions to. How important is this reconciliation process? And in your case, how do you usually go about it?
So you have to keep going until you figure it out. So we'll start with the case that gets reported to us, but then what we'll also do is sample. So everyone across various teams will take samples of leads, and I hate that word lead because it dehumanizes it. It's like a person who wants to buy something from you didn't buy something from you. Why? So go and listen to that whole journey, map out the whole conversation. How many times did we try to get a hold of them? Did we send them a WhatsApp? Where did they drop off on the funnel? So taking a sample of 20, if you find something, take a bigger sample, and then just start fixing things as you find them.
At the very beginning, before you had a team, I mean, this is a very good process, but before you had a team, how were you handling it perhaps with your co-founders? I think at the very beginning, whether it's a one-person team or two or however the number might be, but very small, and you have these info segments or pain points that you want to address with your customers. How are you guys sort of like going through that particular process? And I'm asking this on behalf of founders who doesn't have the same workforce as you may do or the same employees as you may have at this particular moment. At the very beginning, how are you going through this?
So I think this might actually be one of the few things that's easier when you're small, because when we started out, maybe we were a little bit naive, but we worked customer service, we worked with the claims team, we worked with the sales team, we were on the front line. So we were getting that first person experience and feedback the whole time. So I think as the business scales, you get further and further removed from where the customer actually is, and then you have to force yourself to get back to where you actually touch or where you interact with your customer. But at the start, like I would really, because I think most experienced corporate people as they started our business would have from the get-go hired customer support people because it's very draining to run a business and to be customer support, because customer support never stops. Like, never take holiday, every weekend you're working, but you learn so much by engaging with those customers that you get to make a product and a service that's actually better. And when the business matures, you also understand those functions a lot better. So if you get feedback from that function, you're a lot more able to discern between what's noise versus what's real signal of something being wrong.
I saw on your website, and I mean, on your website, your chatbot has your name. And I wanted to ask, do you still speak with customers to this day? Do you take customer service calls?
So yeah, actually, I haven't been doing that directly. So there's something that we always put it on the agenda, but at the moment, it's probably a failing in our business that we need to be more proactive there. We do review a lot of it, and I think we're at a point now where we build quality assurance teams that will listen to interactions and review conversations very frequently, and they provide reports to us in terms of what needs to be improved. And we trust those teams, but I think nothing replaces the real thing of actually being in the front lines. So it's probably something where we need to sharpen up a bit.
And I mean, some companies have traditions. I know there are some companies in the retail space who usually say every manager, perhaps once a month, they have to go to like a retail location and they have to serve customers. So let's say it could be a McDonald's or whatever other retail place it may be, a franchisee as it were, and they have to go there and serve some customers. And the point of this is you have to really understand what consumers are going through as they utilize your service. Was there at any point that you guys used to do this? Do you have any traditions that you established with your co-founders about this is how we will stay close to the customer pain points, or understanding how our users feel about the services we offer them?
Yeah, so we used to do that. So we used to be customer support with the claims team, with the sales team. So that's very much ingrained in the DNA. I think the way I get a lot of the data now is I sit in the sales floor. So I sit amongst the sales team. When we were starting the claims team, I didn't sit separately. I actually sat in the middle of the claims team to hear what are people talking about, where are the areas of frustration, etc. So yeah, I think it's super critical for any business to know what your customers are thinking.
The Pineapple strategy from the very beginning to this point, has it changed at all? And if I could ask you this very same question differently, do you think the company still represents stand for what it stood for when you initially began? Have there been changes? How has it evolved over time?
So I think the values have stayed the same. So we've always said we want to be customer centric, and that's always been our core North Star. When we flesh that out a little bit, it translates to fairest of them all. So we want to be the fairest insurer of them all. But what has changed is how that manifests itself. So when we started the business, we thought we were going to change the world with product. And we did all of these innovations on the product front. But what we realized is insurance is already so complex that if you innovate on top of that complexity, customers are even more confused and not less confused. So we've shifted a lot of our attention is how do we innovate on experience, because that's something that really alleviates that stress and alleviates the complexity. So how can we make it easier for you to buy, easier for you to manage, easier to claim, easier to do your pre-inspection, give you a better price. So really stuck with the same values, but how we've got there has been quite different from what we had anticipated.
Great. Okay, so I want to ask the audience a question. Can I see the hands of those that have insurance, please? Car insurance, house insurance. Okay, this is this is fairly good. Can I see the hands of those that use pineapple insurance? Oh, that man was very proud. He was like, I'm here. I saw another hand. All right. I want to do something practical here. The hands of those that use pineapple insurance again? 2. Okay. Can I see the hands of those that have ever called pineapple insurance to get a quote or to speak with an agent? Can I get a sense of, perhaps from one or two of you, why you didn't either switch to pineapple insurance or why you're not using it at the moment? And then for those that are not using pineapple insurance, if you happen to have had some wine that we had in the bag, you will have to settle the bill, because this is, for those that have called pineapple insurance, can I have just one or two of you tell me what is the experience? Why have you not switched over, if that may be the case? Just one or two, quickly, please. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify with my other insurer and just compare the value.
Oh, don't compare. Just switch over.
I go.
Okay, one more. One more, please. Kevin, please.
I got a quote initially, I'll say in 2023, when I was working in Pretoria, and obviously the conditions of your insurance are attached, like your ID number, so on the system. And then I try to because my conditions change, I work in Joburg, so my car's parked in different areas. And when I try to change that, on the system, those initial conditions were linked to my ID number, so I couldn't change that. So that kind of frustrated me a bit, so then I just moved on.
Okay. If you restart the process, I might get a very big bonus, just so you know. So I would encourage you to restart that particular process.
The reason why I asked just this question is because I think more than 70% of South Africans are not insured. And when the cost of living goes up, what the first cost that you cut off? Insurance. Right? Many people, as soon as perhaps you get a new job but it doesn't pay the same as your previous one, your cost of living goes high, whatever the case might be, the very first thing that you cut off is insurance, right? Because you think, well, I think I can make it without it. And the often assumption that I know that Pineapple has spoken about in some of your content is that many people always wish and they always believe that they will never need insurance. Like, many of us truly believe my car will never be stolen. I'll never be in an accident, right? That's what we believe. And I want to bring this back to you and just check with you. At the very beginning, even without digital insurance has just always been a very tedious process. There's a high level of distrust that existed way long before the company was even launched. And I think in some spaces that still remains the very same. Some people ask, where do my premiums go? So suppose I pay them every single month. I never get in an accident. I don't need to use them. Maybe I don't drive a lot. Where do my premiums go? And I know that there's a community port that you have that we're going to talk about. But what do you think is the solution to this high level of community trust? And particularly, if you can bring it to the community port that you have, could you also talk about, I think it's the bonuses. What is the actual process of how you give the money back to consumers? Because I know from the community port, you will use a portion of it for your operations, and then you cover premiums, and then you have a process about these the particular premiums that remain, but the money that has not been utilized. How does the process go for Pineapple?
Cool. So I think the first step in fixing that trust barrier is understanding. So I think the way that a lot of people view their insurance is they see it as almost a savings account. So I'm paying into this savings account the whole time, and eventually I'm expecting to get something back. But what actually happens in the background, which is such a cool thing that people don't realize, is when you pay your insurance premium, that premium isn't just sitting there. That premium is actually helping other people. So when someone else has a claim, a portion of your premium is going towards paying their claim. So it's actually a community of people that come together to help each other out, and that's how insurance was started. So I think getting that story back into insurance is pivotal, and I think the cashback concept, and I know it came up now, is I think if people really knew that cashback concept is quite superficial. Actually, you only get a very small portion of the actual premiums you pay back after 2 to 3 years. It's not really a substantial part of the product, and what a lot of the insurers will do is they'll actually just load your premium to fund that cashback. So I think the trust aspect is one thing. So we've really tried to show consumers, okay, the premium you pay is actually helping other people in your community, because that's what the premium's there for. And if you don't have a claim in 5 years, it's not like your premium's still sitting there. We've already used it to repair other people's cars and replace their phones, etc. And that's what we've also started the sort of pineapple juice mechanism, where if the loss ratio exceeds what the expectations were, so let's say we priced higher than what the expectations were, then there will be a portion that can go back to customers. So that's sort of having a more fair way of looking at the insurance community.
This transparency effect is very important when it comes to insurance. I know for a fact that, and as you may know, insurance will make a lot of money if no one ever claims, right? So they get to keep the money. And you have done a lot to really be transparent and communicating to your community and the users about what is the process, where does your money go, what are we doing with it. Has this helped in terms of acquiring customers, in terms of your customer acquisition costs? And at the very beginning, how did you break into this particular space that is filled with so much distrust? You're a very new product, you are a very new company, and you're trying to convince people or potential customers that don't even trust the traditional insurance companies. What is the message? What were you saying? What were you communicating to them?
So I think that's part of that iteration process for us. Is I think that transparency factor has potentially helped less than what we had initially hoped. I think the things that we have seen helps more are things like your online ratings. What are people saying about you online? As an example, of Google ratings 4.7. I think the next best insurance provider is sitting at 3.8 or something like that. And if you look at Hello Peter, almost everyone's on 10, because it's not that. What Google's got a very rigorous system to verify that reviews that are coming through are from legitimate email addresses. So it's hard for anyone to push up their Google ratings, but there's a lot of Hello Peter insurers that are on 10. But if you look at the Google rating, we're on 4.7. The next is on 3.8, and we found that something like that has proven to be more effective than this thing that we spend so much time to architect. And I think we probably could have preempted this from the start, because when we started the business, we asked customers, before you buy insurance, what do you look at to see if you can trust it? And probably for our demographic, I think it was the highest factor was either online reviews or word of mouth. So and getting that up is something that most startups can probably do quite easily by, if a customer has a good experience, ask them to go and give you a rating online.
I sometimes liken this very two things. So the typical word of mouth, something that I can say to a person, and perhaps a review that I read online, provided it's not written by some board or coming from an email address that doesn't belong to an actual human being, but I sometimes compare the two. And word of mouth is impossible if you're not offering quality service. It is still possible, but it's negative. The sentiments generated across the board just becomes negative. The other day, we were speaking with a number of clients of ours, and it was an office hours session, and I'm curious to learn if this has ever been something that you guys have ever come across. So it's an office hours. Usually we are answering something related to their advertising and how that's currently going. And then one of the partners asks if anyone had a question precisely related to the work that we're doing for them, right? And of course, we're not satisfied about something in this particular case. Now, usually sentiment like this, it goes through everyone that is within that particular session. If one client is not satisfied and they voice out their lack of satisfaction, there's likely going to be another person who's also not satisfied about something. Then you have a large group of people that start building up and sharing their frustrations, and everyone starts thinking, perhaps this is not working. This is a very different business, but the concept really close, and I wanted to just check with you, is this something that you've ever come across where you have a certain platform, customers are voicing out their lack of satisfaction, perhaps to the product, customer service, the claims process, and how do you manage that? How do you mitigate this particular sentiment that you might see online, or when the conversation starts getting a little bit louder than you would like it to get in terms of the negative stuff that they may be experiencing?
So yeah, I think insurance, that will always be part and parcel. So we always try and approve claims that are fair, and fortunately and unfortunately, we will have to reject claims where if someone's drunk driving, or if they were 30, 40 kilometers over the speed limit, you're driving 120 in a 60 zone, we have to reject that claim. And more often than not, people will be quite outspoken in instances like that. But our philosophy has always been that our customers are community, so if you don't reject invalid claims, everyone's premium will have to go up. So it's in everyone's benefit to pay valid claims as quickly as possible, and invalid claims where people are drunk driving, excessive speeding, not to pay them. And as such, you will have some negative sentiment come out on social media, and a lot of people will actually be quite vocal in instances like that because they try to apply pressure for you to change your mind. And that's where your principles need to be very strong. So you need to not be influenced by something like that. And then what we also try and do is we try to be very proactive on those channels. So if someone is reaching out there, we try and respond as quickly as possible, but try to get them to work through an internal complaints department first. If you can get them to complain internally, do that, and then have a very excellent internal team that can resolve it. If it's still not resolved, if they complain online, then be as proactive as you can at that point and actually respond there where they are complaining. And then I think the only counterbalance to that, but I think the research suggests that to offset one negative word of mouth element that you've heard about a brand, you need 10 positive ones. So you have to get people to speak up about their positive experiences as well, so that at least if they've heard one negative review, they can get 10 positive ones.
What do you think still remains or requires attention in the insurance industry? I'm going to get into a little bit of the AI stuff, but I think Pineapple has been using AI for quite some time now. First, I would like to understand, in what areas do you see it improving things? Is it in customer service, user experience? And then the other side of this is, what are some of the downsides you have currently had to deal with, particularly when it comes to bias? Now, I don't know where the bias comes from. I don't know if it comes from the training data, where it automatically, excludes or doesn't recommend individuals because for whatever reason that may be. How are you dealing with this particular bias? Because as we continue to scale the utilization and the use cases of AI on the continent, in the insurance industry as well, or financial services, there's always going to be a component that we are watching closely to see how do we mitigate a certain individual simply being excluded from the service for a reason that really shouldn't be there in the first place. How is Pineapple Insurance dealing with this?
So I think the big thing in insurance, especially when you talk about pricing, is explainability. So the big challenge with AI and insurance pricing has always been explainability. So there are AI models that can give you a very accurate risk prediction score. The challenge has always been understanding what that black box is thinking. But recently there's been really good breakthroughs in terms of actually understanding what's happening inside that black box so that you can detect that bias and mitigate for it proactively.
And I mean, as we go into whatever next iteration that you currently have, how do you foresee AI continue to change the way that you currently either look at your claims, process your claims? How much do you think you're going to embed it in your entire service offering? And do you foresee at any point, and I know that you have a focus on the human touch in the process, do you ever foresee a time where not just insurance, but any other number of industries, that entire value chain can entirely be replaced by an AI agent, as it were? Do you think that will ever be the case in terms of insurance or any other industry at all?
So yeah, it's hard to predict where all of this will go. I think at the speed it's going now, it's very hard to extrapolate something that's evolving this quickly into the future. I think what we've been surprised by is, I think a lot of our gut feel when sort of the LLMs and things came out is a lot of the low-hanging fruit will be on your quick and simple conversations, like quick back and forth. The customer comes with a query, the bot responds. Customer's got to follow up, the bot responds again. But what we found is that has a higher likelihood in leading to a path of hallucination. So the short format, it's harder to keep the bot focused and grounded on what they actually need to solve. And I think where our focus has shifted for now, I think the technology will evolve to cater for that over time. But now, long form queries, it seems to be incredibly powerful at that. So a claim is an incredibly good example of what a long form complex query is. So you can give the bot access to a lot of data that you have and ask it what's the probability that this is a valid claim, and then you can separate your claims into low risk, medium risk, high risk, and then you can apply various levels of scrutiny based on that. So I think for us, the 80-20 rule is probably going to be a more likely outcome of 80%, well, I'll probably say 20% full automated, 50-60% one click, and then 20% the AI refers to a specialist to focus on that.
Has it ever been wrong? I mean, perhaps the model or the way that you currently utilize it, let's say perhaps you are looking at a claim or you are assessing whether or not to insure a particular person, you're assessing the risk factors involved with a person that lives in a particular area, you might be looking at that. Has it ever been inaccurate? And in a way that you can clearly see that perhaps this should not have been the outcome of the process.
So yeah, it does definitely hallucinate a lot. I think where that particularly happens is if you have this series of queries. So if you ask it one thing, then another thing, then another thing, then over time it can get off course quite a lot. For the longer form queries, we're not so much asking it for a black and white answer. We're more asking it for like, look into this, this is strange. Because some of those LLMs can do physics at like a doctorate level. So in a car insurance accident, there's a lot of physics involved. So you can ask the tool to give you some insights in terms of the things to look for. So we haven't viewed it through that lens of is it right or is it wrong. We see it more as a tool to assist at this point. So we haven't evaluated through that lens.
And I know that this, of course, you mentioned that, of course, it's difficult to predict where this ends. In the context of the country and the continent, what are some of those prevailing use cases that you're seeing in terms of AI? And of course, this is outside of just Pineapple Insurance. What are some of those prevailing use cases that you're currently seeing? And do you think we have, perhaps we are adopting this at a faster rate enough to be able to see the actual, let's say, productive or fruitful outcomes compared to other countries in the West, as it may be?
I think it's difficult to say. I think the big thing for us is we'll always try and leverage the technology because we'll never be able to compete with X with their massive training clusters, etc. So we'll always leverage the technology they have, and I think that's the big advantage that this technological revolution will have is it's so accessible to all of us. Anyone who knows how to use a computer or knows how to do a quick API integration can have access to the most advanced artificial intelligence models that the world's ever seen. And if you think about any sort of complex data-driven query, any customer support-based function, anything that you're doing over the phone or over email or over text, there's opportunity there. So I think there's so much opportunity if people just look at what are the problems, where are we spending man hours that could be used more effectively. I think the one thing that saying I quite like, or a principle that the Japanese have, is anything that can be automated should be automated, because then people can spend their time focusing on things that give them more fulfillment. So I don't believe that it will destroy a lot of jobs, at least not in the short to medium term. I think anyone who works at a startup knows how long the to-do list is, so it'll probably just allow us to do the other things on the to-do list as a start. So,
a few more questions, and I'm going to the audience. Some of your, let's say, some of your key advantages, as they were usually digitization, personalization, safety features. These at the moment have become a necessity for every other company. How do you see yourself maintaining the pace of innovation or the pace of lead? Or how, rather in your words, how will you keep on competing with yourself over the next 5-10 years?
I think for us, culture is incredibly important there. I think that's something that we probably didn't pay enough attention to in the early days, but I think maintaining a culture of incredibly competent people who are willing to take on responsibility, sacrifice the present to the future, and that buy into what the company wants to achieve is, in the long run, probably your best competitive advantage, because the technological landscape will always shift, and if you've got the best people, you'll be able to adapt the fastest to that shift in technological landscape. So we're putting a lot of focus into making sure that our culture facilitates the ability to attract and keep the best people.
Fundraising, you've raised at different stages. You've raised, I think, 8.5 million, the 400 million. You won a competition, I think, for $1.5 million as well. How have you been able to raise, particularly in very difficult conditions? So VC funding goes down. It's not that the money is not there anymore, but their preference in terms of where they allocate it becomes very, very conservative and a little bit calculated. There's no free money to give anyone anymore. Some companies still continue to raise money, even in difficult conditions. How did you manage to raise money in COVID? And what have been some of the lessons that you've learned throughout all the time that you've raised funding?
So yeah, it's very, very, probably the most difficult part of the startup journey, as I'm sure most of you are aware of. And it's also the most emotionally draining, especially, I think, in countries like the US, the startups hold a lot more leverage because there's a lot more companies that are looking to come in on the deal. But in South Africa, all the leverage, well, not all the leverage, but the majority of the leverage sit with the venture capital fund because there's not that much competition. So I think that principle of making sure you negotiate with multiple parties at the same time to create that FOMO as a counter lever to the fear of making a mistake is very important. I think the one thing that really helps I think the one thing that we've realized is a lot of our fundraisers have also have come via introduction. So if you have an existing shareholder on your cap table and you're opening a new fundraise and they recommending you as a business to peers within the industry, you've got a lot better chance than if you cold approach someone. So I think if you are reaching out to people, it might be a better idea to rather see if someone within your network knows someone at that fund and ask for an introduction because they're probably getting hundreds of solicitations. The other thing is the value of a good quality data room, so just making sure you do the basics right, like good pitch deck, good data room that has all the data that people need. And then the one thing that I think people underestimate as well is the power of design. So if you're putting a pitch deck or anything out there, just get a designer to properly skin the deck and make it look professional because the perception value of that slide deck is going to be your first impression. So if your first impression is good, then you've got a lot more chance of people actually consuming that data.
Great. I'm gonna take the first 5 questions. I'm just gonna ask. So please note them for me. That's 1, 2, 3, 2 more, please. 4, 5. I think 4, 5, and then we'll be good. The last one from my end. I think it's things that work. They don't require to be fixed. What are some of the things that you think you got wrong in the very beginning or as part of the journey to this point? How did you fix that?
I think my experience hasn't been that things that work. Things are always breaking. Like I think everyone knows technology company, human organizations, the natural state of things are to be disorganized and broken. And you need a team of highly focused, highly dedicated people to continuously fix everything that breaks and keep things moving in the right direction. So yeah, I think we've made so many mistakes. I think we've moved back in systems twice. We've on the product side, we were building products and features that were too complex for people to understand. We've had marketing campaigns that were complete disasters. I think, but we've always tried to create that culture where people feel safe to take risks, because I think if you start to create that culture where failure is unacceptable, then you don't create the environment for people to take risks, and you don't create the environment for people to try things. And then you will end up with, and I think you can see that in a lot of corporate marketing, is no one wants to lose their job over a marketing campaign, so no one's willing to take a risk and do something silly or stupid or self-deprecating, and it all just blends in like consumers don't really see it. So yeah, I think creating that safe space where if we can see that someone properly committed themselves and they tried something that didn't work, then we all take accountability for that. It's not pointing the finger at someone.
It's perhaps 50 years from now and you're looking back at your journey, your entrepreneurship journey, the pineapple journey. What do you hope the company has achieved? What would you be most proud of in terms of the accomplishments and the milestones of yourself as the leader of the company and the company in general?
North Star for us in terms of. So I think there's two elements to it. I think from a performance perspective, I think for me, want to be the largest. It would be great if we can all true to our values and if our core executive team can stick together through that period, because I think what we've got as a management team is incredibly rare. Or it's a rare group of people that are like-minded, where values align and everyone's taking on as much responsibility as what they can possibly carry and orienting themselves in the right way. So if we can keep that team together, always never compromise on our values, and then hopefully that results in us being the most successful insurer in South Africa. That will be good enough.
Happy. I need a favor, so when you ask your question, please say your name and then just get into the question. We'll take maybe 2 more rounds. The first one?
The question that is quite a tricky prompt, so I'm going to see how good of an LLM you are. Okay, so firstly, would you be able to share the number of users you have? And then the second aspect of that is, would you be able to share your CAC? If you're not able to share your CAC, then can you share the strategies and steps that you're currently undertaking to reduce it? And then I have a bunch of other questions about the other people here, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Going straight into it. So, unfortunately, the first 2 are quite sensitive, so not able to share them. But to try and compensate for that, I will give you some of the things we're doing on our cost of acquisition side. So,
this is reduction, right? This is for reduction.
yes. So all our customers that come to Pineapple, we know exactly where they came from. So we know exactly which ads you clicked on, which platform you came from, if you came from a partner, which partner, and all the teams that, there's different teams that manage each of those sources, and the heads of those teams meet every day to do exactly that OKR-based process, where we have targets for each of those channels. Each of those channels are broken down further into sub-channels with their own targets, and on a daily basis we all sit together, and myself and the COO sit in all of those meetings, and we analyze exactly which channels are performing what, the cost of acquisition for each channel. And then separate to that, we'll have meetings with those channels on an individual basis to say, okay, let's say Facebook's performing well. What's the creative on Facebook that is performing well? And why is it performing well? And which iterations can we make on that creative to test what portion of that creative it is that is performing well? So it's very, very, very data driven. So the goal is to get to a point where 100% of your sales, you know exactly where that sale came from both the first touch and the last touch perspective.
Great. My name is Muzi Vato, and I have 2 questions for you. I'm glad you spoke about design, firstly. First question is, how important is it for your product designers to have their work visible online?
Sorry, to have?
Their work, like their portfolio.
So in their personal capacity.
Sorry?
Or you're asking in their personal capacity?
What is stuff from scratch?
Okay. So I'm asking for your product designers, how important is it for them to be present online and showcase what they can do? Yes.
Sorry, I want to make sure I understand it correctly because I don't want to.
You hire,
Yes.
how important is it that they have their personal portfolios online?
Through Pineapple. So what he's trying to ask is that, as a product designer, how important is it that I showcase what I've done for Pineapple at the personal capacity online?
But you're employed by Pineapple?
Or not yet?
Or not?
Is it a potential
Yes,
employee?
No, you are employed by Pineapple.
So I think once you employed by us, we've done the vetting. So we've got a rule that for every person we hire, we want to interview between 10 and 20 people. So that means if you are there, then we know you're good enough. And then the measurement criteria shifts to our own internal measurement criteria. So then for our designers, we'll have a set of criteria that you get measured against on a daily basis. And then what we also have built is what's called a level up system. So you will know as a designer exactly what you need to do to be able to level up and get a promotion. So your promotion's not dependent on some arbitrary Remco cycle or whatever. As soon as you meet the requirements to be a level 2 designer, you become a level 2, level 3, level 4, etc. So yeah, I think once you work for us, the measurement criteria is as what we define internally.
Okay. And then lastly, you spoke about design thinking when you started the show, the event. How often do you host design sessions?
So it's not in that formalized structure anymore. So it's more, and it's also an orientation. So when we get customer feedback, to take it seriously and to understand it. But it takes a different, on all of the teams, it takes a different format. So on claims, it'll be looking at individual claims experiences and seeing how we can iterate. On the website, it will be looking at drop-off funnels and see which people drop off. On the sales side, it will be looking at calls and seeing where people drop off in that funnel. What's the quality of the service? How do they rate us? So it's different in nature now. On the product side, it will be in the form of surveys. So before we do any product, we don't decide what product we're going to do. We come up with a bunch of products and then we ask our customers, what do you want us to do next? So yeah, it takes a different shape in all of the teams.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to first start with yourself, Sam, and the team. Again, nice, great event. So thank you very much again, guys. Then I'd like to come to yourself, Marnus. Okay, introduce. My name is Sibusiso Manenza. I'm the co-founder of a company called Credible, which is a talent marketplace and talent insights platform, as well as then Ocean Innovations as well, which is in the education space as we develop people and businesses that stand the test of time. My question to you, sir, is that I hope would benefit everybody. You know, when you're starting the company, when you're starting the venture, it's all good, it's fun, come up with the name, Pineapple, it's fun. And then things hit the fan, things get tough. So the question really becomes, how do you guys handle the co-founder dynamics and the leadership dynamics that come from the difficult times, the difficult questions, especially in the beginning, when you guys are splitting your hairs about how to get the funding? Linked to that then becomes the funding question, becomes, what was then the most difficult obstacles you guys faced when you were going and raising funding, especially when you went out of the country and now dealing with what are the international requirements, especially with an insurance company, because we all know that insurance is sold, it's not bought, and I think you guys have done a great job in marketing continuously. So those are really my two questions, and then my third comment would be, I'm gonna stay with Pineapple for a while because I know that. So shout out to you guys. I love the work that you guys have done.
Cool. So I think the first question, because you know and I, you'll be able to testify to this, is it really, I don't know how we would have done what we've gotten through those difficult times if we had someone with ego on the team. I think it's in the startup space, it's incredibly important not to have ego in the room, because, and we've seen this in the past, one person can kill that whole culture. If there's one person with ego in the team, everybody loses the ability to challenge each other and have it not be personal. So I think if you're starting a startup, I think really pay a lot of attention to the people who you're starting it with. Do they have any sense of ego, or is what you see what you get with them? So I think that's really helped us to navigate the tough times, is we've been able to have really tough conversations when things get difficult. Then, from a fundraising perspective, I think in insurance, the toughest thing to prove out always is customer growth. So you have to show consistently that you're able to acquire customers and keep them. And then also that you are able to acquire customers that aren't blowing your loss ratio out. So if you're pricing customers wrong, then you can end up in a situation where your loss ratio is your claim divided by your premium. So if you're pricing people wrong, your loss ratio goes up, and then you don't have a sustainable business. So those are the two big things that you need to prove out consistently on the insurance side. And sorry, the third one?
It was just a comment. You guys have my money for a while.
Yes, let's go.
Thank you very much, Marnus. So my name is Sabelo Madiba. I come from Asansa Solution. We are primarily a marketing technology startup. We've developed a platform that pretty much does the COC that he was asking about, and I'm glad that you guys obviously have internal capabilities to do that. So I want two things from you, Mark. I want to get out of here with a meeting with you, number one. And then I want to understand, as he mentioned, that you guys have a great marketing, by the way. And we see you guys, your awareness is up there. But I want to understand in terms of the tracking, monitoring, and measurement of your marketing activities, particularly the billboards. How are you guys then tracking? Because I saw you posted on LinkedIn and you said 60% of the time your billboards are right. So I just want to understand that context, because obviously on the digital side of things, you have tools that help you to monitor all of that. But I want to understand that part. And then I really appreciate to have a presentation to show you guys what we can do with our startup to assist you with it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so the first part, more than happy to be. I think
I wanted to add and say, we have not even 50% of the country is currently insured. So being the largest doesn't mean that they have to insure 100% of the population. It just would be larger, focusing on those particular individuals that are currently insured. Would that be correct?
Yes, so our target is the millennial demographic. That makes up, I think it's about 70% of the workforce in South Africa. It's a massive untapped market. So if we can ensure the majority of the millennials in the country, then we'll be the largest insurer.
Marnus, last one, you are walking just by the corner, you meet another entrepreneur founder, you're having a conversation. It's not per se advice, but you're just sharing some of your insights from your own journey. What would those particular insights be?
That's a good one.
I think the one thing that has really helped me is the mindset of taking on as much responsibility as I can willingly carry, and doing so willingly. Because I think once you make that switch in your mind that taking on responsibility willingly as much as you possibly can will lead to you having a meaningful life and to pursuing a life of purpose and to sacrifice yourself for a better good, then the way that you look at all your struggles changes fundamentally. So every day we get up early or get home late, you don't feel resentful towards that because you're consistently reminding yourself that you're doing this by choice and you're taking on this burden by choice. And that if you know that you're taking on as much responsibility as you possibly can, it will be the best thing for you in the long run and will result in you having the most meaningful life that you possibly can. I think that mindset is incredibly powerful.
You're speaking to an early founder and an early employee of a startup. What would you suggest to advise?
So I would say fall in love with your problem, not your solution, and then just be willing to, if your solution doesn't work, try something else, especially if your problem's worth solving. but it's a good idea to pick a problem that is worth solving, both from either it has to impact many different people for a small amount, or it has to impact a few people for a very big amount. But if you have to build something that, if it's successful, it will be commercially viable as a start.
If you were not running Pineapple Insurance, what company would you be running? And if you were to restart again, what would you be doing if not Pineapple Insurance?
Sure, but you might be surprised, probably fast food. I've always wanted to start a fast food chain, so I think probably that.
Marnus, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me, Samuel, and thanks everyone for coming.
Absolutely. If anyone bothers you with meeting requests, just send them to me and we'll sort that out. To every one of you, thank you so much for making time. 2 announcements. Actually, maybe the first one is on the 22nd of May, we're having a workshop on how to build an AI agent within 60 minutes or within an hour. Right? Whether you're running a small business in terms of categorization or startup, I think this is important information. And we have some experts and professionals, personally that I know, who have built a number of products using these new tools for quite some years now, and they continue to do so. If you have an interest in how to build an AI agent, please do join us on the 22nd of May. We're going to host the workshop here. It's going to be a smaller crowd. We have very limited seats, and it's going to be in one of our boardrooms. Again, if you have any interest at all in learning, what is this all about? It's not hype anymore. This thing is here to stay. If you have any interest, 22nd of May, this is where we are. The second announcement, so we are running a program across a number of institutions, tertiary institutions, a number of workshops. Currently, we're working with the Regent Business School. We're running a number of workshops. If you personally know, any institution that would like to have some entrepreneurship programs happen within the vicinity of their institutions, please let me know. We are running a number of, not just AI, but a number of entrepreneurship workshops, small business workshops, and we're doing this across a number of institutions around the country. If you personally know any that you think it'll be worthy for us to have a conversations with, please do let me know. I think that'd be pretty great. Then my last one for you, you're a founder, you're an entrepreneur, your life is pain, but generally life and living is pain, right? The things that you go through, that's your cost of living. Your cost of living is not how much VAT the government is charging. Your cost of living is that sometimes you can pay your rent, sometimes you can pay your employees, sometimes you're late on your car payments. That's your cost of living. You're going through these things because you've chosen a path less chosen. This is your cost of living. And you will come across a number of founders and small business owners who say, hey, things are tough, and hey, I can't make payroll, and hey, I can't do this. Guess what? That's your cost of living. For some of you who might be considering, moving from being a founder to being an employee at another company, listen to me. Go do that. I will be so proud of you. You have not lost anything. You have gained a number of lessons. You don't stop being an entrepreneur because you join another company. Please hear me on this one. You don't stop being a founder because you join Pineapple Insurance or another company. In fact, some of the companies that we know have been started by people who said, I was an employee or an early employee in this particular startup, and then after a few years, I thought I was well resourced and knowledge enough to go start my own thing. When you feel like, okay, it's time to go start something else, don't make anyone make you feel ashamed of the journey that you've walked. It doesn't matter if you worked on this thing for 10 years, when you feel like it's time to go have your bills settled for a little while before you go back, go do that. I continue to applaud you because you are learning and you're going through the steps of what it actually takes to build a business. Your startup is not going to become like Pineapple Insurance. You're not building the next Amazon. You're not building the next whatever company. Your journey is unique to yourself and the problem that you're solving. So be proud of that, hold on to that, and truly, really go build something worthwhile. Thank you so much.